Patterns are in Photoshop really all about giving a photo or a surface some texture, or making a photo look like something that's printed, using a traditional printing method like offset lithography or a halftone screen sort of thing. Here you can see we have this photo, and it's just pretty high contrast, pretty bright, but when I put on a pattern, it's subtle, but there is this kind of half tone. Looks like it could have been pulled out of a magazine, right? So we'll talk about how to achieve something like that. Also, this type of thing, surface textures, and so on. So to do something like this, pretty simple. Just started with a flat fill color, so adding a solid color, just making it red. And then I'm going to, on top of that, add a pattern layer. And so when this pops up here, it's going to want you to pick what type of pattern it is that you want to use. You can click OK. You can access that same thing through your patterns window area in your dock. And if you don't see it, then you're going to go down to Window and to Patterns, and then, it might just open up out here, but you can drag and drop it in to the dock. This is another one like Gradient that when you double click on, like you would an adjustment layer, it's going to open up the pattern fill dialog. It's not going to open up the properties with different sliders and things like that in the same way as other adjustment layers would. So you do have to go into Patterns itself, the Patterns window itself. And then from there you can select different things. So I'm looking under, potentially canvases or brushes or surfaces of some kind. And just, this is the one I, clearly used before. Click on it and then click away, and then you can just clip it down. But you will need to certainly use some kind of a blend mode. At the very least, you could get into it with opacity changes, but that's going to affect your underlying color more than a blend mode probably would, where it's taking pixel combinations into consideration in a different way. But just going through these, you'll see there's all kinds of different potentially good ways that I could affect that surface. And when I did this before, the one I thought looked pretty good was, I don't even know what blend mode I used, I guess, because it looks like I turned it off at some point, but we'll just go with this one. Fantastic, right? Then I typed out some shapes, essentially, just with the type tool, typed out the word pattern. Now this is still editable text. I could change the font. I could change, the word itself or whatever. But then I've done the same type of thing here. This is clipped, but when the pattern is not clipped, it just looks like this. And it's just like a halftone pattern. And so those are something that is accessible under legacy default patterns. Some of the more useful ones usually are within legacy default patterns or artist brushes or surfaces, but there's lots of other ones too that you should just explore, and depending on what you're doing, you might find a really nice textural effect. But yeah, these ones are the ones that allow you to do more like a halftone screen. And so you can click on that, and then double clicking on the adjustment icon itself will then give you this ability to control angle, but also scale. And so you can determine how big you want each of those, in this case, dots to be. And from there, when you clip it down to the underlying shape, then, and I got to turn this layer off, then it's going to clip down to just whatever's right underneath it. And that's an easy sort of effect, right? So similarly, let me turn these all off. Starting with this photo, here we have a couple of different options. So this particular pattern or the one that we just used, either one of those would work well for creating this kind of, like I said, something that looks more like it was ripped out of a magazine. And obviously, depending on how big you make those, you're going to get a completely different look. But if it's something that's a bit more subtle, and if you couple it with a blend mode, in this case I have linear burn or color dodge or something, they're going to all give you very different effects. But under normal, doesn't really probably work. But when you get to sizing, you know, a little bit more subtle, and then you start to play around with those blend modes. And here the sizing is just too small to even see what's going on. But let's try linear burn and then go back into it, make those dots a bit bigger, and now you're starting to see there's a happy medium here for sure, right? But when I get it, it starts to look, and this might not show up super well on video, I don't know, but I'll zoom in a little bit here and you can see at the right distance with the right printing method or whatever, it's going to look like something out of a magazine with a halftone, and that can be a great effect. So patterns, often useful. I don't use them a ton, but you know, I can see how they could be utilized.